Hello and welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day as always. First thing I want to say is thank you very much for purchasing one of my DIYer Monster Plenum mods. This upload is an instructionable on how to install that Plenum box mod that you have purchased. There are two different models, a late and early model, but it's pretty much irrelevant. There's a couple notes that I will send you in the instructions where it's going to reference an early versus a late model manifold and to notice the differences and how to adjust your bending techniques and cutting techniques. This is what your Plenum mod will ultimately look like. Hopefully your welds are a little bit better than mine. How do you put that on there? That's what I'm going to walk you through right now. Step one is going to tell you that before you do a single thing, the very first thing you need to do is you need to thoroughly clean your intake manifold of any and all grease, grime, gunk, whatever the case may be. And that is 100% for welding and easeability on taking it apart and cutting it. Because let's just be honest here, no one wants to work on anything dirty. It just sucks. Second, it's going to remind you that less is more. I say that, and prime example of that is this. I actually cut this intake a little too much. Accidents happen, it's whatever. Second, it's going to go over how to outline your intake manifold for cutting. Now, both styles of intake manifolds, which sadly I do not have another one of these to show you exactly how to cut the intake, but it's identical to this except for this little bit right here, right? And you can see that right there. There's a little bit of a raised edge there, and you're gonna cut that smooth. It's pretty self-explanatory when you actually see them in person and you compare. So what you're gonna do when you cut this intake, when you're outlining your intake manifold, there is a ridge inside of here. And let me post a picture up right here of the inside of this intake manifold so you can see it. But there's a ridge in here, this wall. You want to cut on the inside of that wall. That wall is approximately 1/4 of an inch inside. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to take a tape measure and you're going to measure here. Same thing on this side. All the way down like so. If you continue reading through the instructions, it's going to tell you to note less is more. You can always cut and grind more out later, and take a Sharpie and outline your cut similar to the one picture. I did supply a picture here. So I'll go in here and I list on both plenums the area in red is much easier to grind smooth after you cut the rest of the intake. The area that I'm referencing right there is this ledge that's right here. If you can, I'll post a picture. I'll make sure to put a picture in here at some point. But this ledge that I'm referencing right here, where this tab is, on this intake, that ledge doesn't really exist, and you're gonna have a little bit of material, approximately 1/2 inch too much, that you're going to end up trimming off before you fold it over and you just seam weld it across the back. This ledge right here, you're going to want to grind smooth, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Once you got all your lines drawn out around the outside like so, before we start cutting, you want to take note on step 3. It says, before you cut your intake, you need to take special care to not damage your IAT mounting flange. That piece there, that piece there. You will need it later. You will want to draw a box around it, minimum of 1 inch on 3 sides, leaving yourself room for error. Once you have the bottom removed, you can go back and cut this piece out for later use. Now that is a lot of excess. I say 1 inch because I want to give ample amount of room for any error that might incur. The reality is you're only gonna need about that much total. Now that you are at this point, you can feel free to go ahead and cut your intake out, and we'll move on to step 4. And there you go. Easy as that. On the late model intakes versus the early model intakes, there's a little step right here. It's like a casting, a nub. You're gonna wanna just cut a little bit farther forward than that. And then you can come back and you can trim this out with a Dremel, and I'm gonna do that right now so you can see how I do that. And see what I was talking about there, how they casted that little bit into that. Now, if you want to, you can Dremel this little ledge off and make a Dremel bit like this one right here. It's made of carbide. Some of you may have these if you've ever done any of your own home porting, and you can just zzz that right up out of it. I'll show you real quick how well that cuts that out if you are interested. I just cleaned it up and kind of trimmed it back a little bit. You can go way farther. You can completely remove that nub. It's 100% up to you. I have included a few different visuals on different methods that you can port your intakes. This first one right here is just a large port job on the factory runners, and just really to open them up and smooth out all the imperfections in the casting, just to get that air to go through there a lot smoother. The second and third picture are where I have completely removed the trumpets, and I only recommend this style for anything KO4 or larger. If you are still a KO3 car or have no plans on going to KO4s or bigger, just go ahead and leave the trumpets installed and just clean up the castings. All right, so after a quick and brief drive to my farm, so we're gonna move on to step 5. But before I go into that, if you are new to the channel, this is the LSA Audi. It is getting this awesome LSA that I have built at my day job. Which my day job I build superchargers, so it's kind of like hand in hand, why not build one? So, it's pretty cool. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out in the links below, or I might put a thing right here where my battery light is, so you guys can check that out. So let's move on to what we are here for. Step 5 says your Monster Plenum mod comes pre-labeled numerically. With the order you need to bend it in. Take special care to orient the piece when bending. Also, it has relief cuts to aid in bending so that you can bend the piece with your vise, C-clamp, or even a simple metal brake. So, vise, metal brake. This is a Harbor Freight brake. If you don't own one, I highly recommend getting one. They do take up a little bit of space, just know. And then I just go in and tell you that I have a representation, a better representation of how to bend this, and have a full video on YouTube, which we are shooting right now. Note that every bend will be made towards the inside except for bend number 5, which is made outward. Slight trimming of this bend may be required when fitting to a late model intake. Late model intake, early model intake. Hence, this is bend number 5, bend number 5, bend number 5. The difference, once again, the difference. So now this is the point where I'm going to start walking you guys 100% through how to bend this. So it says, starting with bend number 1, you want to bend it inward slightly, less than 20 degrees. This bend is done in a vise with the smaller side being held by the vise jaws. This can be tweaked at time of welding for proper fitment easily. Let's go ahead and make this first bend, and then we'll move on to step 7, which is bends 2 and 3. So when working on your piece, I say to orient it. You want to make sure that you are working towards yourself. So what you want to do is you want to use the top of your vise as a straight edge, and you want to put the jaws just below the relief cut. Should bend very, very easy, and that should be about enough. Get an angle gauge here for you. And then you want to remove that piece. And your bend should look something like that. Now moving on to bends 2 and 3, you want to repeat the exact same process by loading it into your vise. Now this bend is going to be at a complete 90-degree angle. So we're going to go ahead and bend this one in. Should be very easy. Just like so. And then repeat the exact same process on bend number 3. And repeat. Your part should look something like that. And you should start to see how it's going to start to take form. You can always go and test fit it and make sure that your bends are good. There you go. Oh. Bend number 4 is done easily with a C-clamp on the edge of a table and simply bent to match the side of 2 and 3. All right. Bend number 4 is going to be a lot easier to do on the edge of a bench than inside of a vise, being as if you try to hold it all the way down here or just above, the material is going to tendency to want to flex here in the middle. So what I recommend is just taking a C-clamp, like so, and grabbing this bit of the material and set it up just like I have it here, and then you can just pull it in like so. And you're going to want to just bend it till it all matches up like that. It'll look just like that right there. Moving on to step 9, it says bend number 5 varies depending on which manifold you have. Both are bent towards the outside but are bent at different angles, and on late models this bend is much less aggressive than on the early models. On the early model intakes, this bend is almost, well, yeah, it's basically completely parallel with the intake, with the top of the intake bottom, with the intake plenum. Okay? On the late model intakes, you notice how, once again, it contours down. This ledge, I still need to grind off. I have not done it yet. I will before I'm done. So now that I removed that radius, that little lump, you can see that I just removed it and followed the radius or the contour that was already there. And that's the difference of that angle. Now, if you were just to leave it like it is, I'll show you what would happen. Boom, it's not gonna fit. So to bend this last bend, reload back into your vise, bend it just a little bit, and test fit. Bend it a little bit more, test fit it again. Bend it a little bit more. And test fit. Let's bend it a little bit more. And test fit. All right. There we go. So now you can see how it's going to fit on there. Just like that. And I definitely overground on the corners here and here. Just a little bit too much. Once again, it's not the end of the world, but it brings into the fact that less is more. If you overgrind, once again, it's not the end of the world. If you're welding it, you have no one to yell at but yourself. But if your buddy's welding it, he might give you a little bit of shame for it. And then the rest of my instructions are basically just a few recommendations on how to weld up your intake. Step 11 is just a reminder that this is a piece of cast aluminum and that it's very thick and it's going to take a lot of heat and it's going to absorb a lot of heat when welding it. So if you're welding it yourself and this is the first major project of something of this caliber that you're welding, I highly, highly recommend that you stop, go turn your oven on and put it in your oven, and do this when your wife isn't home so she doesn't yell at you. You could use a MAP gas torch, and I've seen people do it with other products, and they just do one of these. They just do one of these and they heat up their material. 100% okay. You can do that. It's not the way I usually do things because I like a nice even distribution of heat. I have done it, but I would not recommend it on such a large piece of material. Finally, step 12. So you got your intake, so you got your Monster Plenum mod all tacked onto your intake manifold, and now you need to move on to step 12, the IAT sensor. All right, well, while your manifold is in the oven, take this time to go ahead and let's fit the IAT sensor and flange to your new plenum. Don't weld it yet, guys. Note that the flange itself has been trimmed down significantly to fit the backside of the flange. If you look at the backside, you're gonna see that giant divot. It's a little big old nub in there. So let's go ahead and go cut this out real quick. I like to use a bandsaw. I have this awesome Bauer Harbor Freight bandsaw. If you don't have one, or if you have a bandsaw and you always want a table, Swag Off-Road makes an awesome bandsaw table. Very, very economical. All right, there we go. I guess it's probably a good time to go ahead and say I am not liable if you decide to grind your finger off or burn yourself. When you're on I use a belt sander to sand these smooth. Now, you can do this by hand. You can do this with an angle grinder. You can do this with a number of methods that are out there. The best part about being a DIYer is that you are handy and clever. So, moving on. You want to trim this piece so that it fits like so. Just like that. Now, some of you might be asking, Jack, what's this hole right there for? Well, that hole right there I have specifically put in for a multitude of reasons. One of those is if you wanted to put in an AND fitting. Another reason is if you want to put a meth injector bong in there or a nitrous bong there. There's a number of reasons that you might want to. Now, there are two options on my intakes that you can purchase. You can purchase one like this one, which does not have that additional hole in it, or you can purchase one that does have this additional hole. They cost exactly the same price. There's no difference. It is just a preference of options. When bolting the IAT sensor in, you must use a thin coat of RTV around the bolt threads to prevent boost leaks. That nub that's on the back side of here that we just took off, okay? Yes, you need to take it off to fit it. But if you were to just run the bolt down in there, yeah, it's probably gonna seal, but it can also leak. So thin coat of RTV, just a little black, blue, red, green, yellow, pink, purple, whatever you happen to have. I recommend black or red, but if you have whatever, even copper, it'll be fine. Just a little dab of RTV on the threads and it's gonna seal right up. Moving on to step 13. Now it's time to weld it, gentlemen and ladies, if you're watching. I recommend when welding to weld 2 to 3 inches at a time and move to a different side. This will aid in maintaining heat in the part and prevent any potential warping. So what I'm saying here is, make your tacks and then start little bit, 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 all the way around the material. I also recommend if you have an F-hose delete on your 2.7, now is a great time to delete that port. This is the F-hose delete. It's right here as well. Come out extremely easy once that part comes straight out of the oven, because the part's going to be nice and hot, and this is steel, so you should just be able to put a pair of vice grips on it, give it a twist, and it'll pull right out. Okay, also doing the front and rear, moving on, doing the front and rear sections last will aid in overall proper fitment, and welding the relief cuts last as well. What I'm suggesting here is that you weld on this side, weld a little bit on this side, weld across here, you know, weld this, start fitting this bit here, or, you know, weld here, fit this bit. This last bit up here, you can weld on this. It's not as much material, so I wouldn't recommend like just burning it down. Ultimately, you can do whatever you want. Those are just my recommendations and how I've welded them. And it just says again here, note the contour differences on the backside of the manifolds, and slight trimming may be needed depending on how you smooth the rear of the late model plenum. So, taking the one we just bent, you'll notice that if you choose to, you can trim off this little bit of excess. It's not necessary. You don't have to do it. It is purely up to you and your aesthetic preferences on that part. Guys, congratulations, you're done. And thank you again for supporting the channel and for purchasing one of my DIY Monster Plenum mods. I just want you guys to know every single dollar from those is going right back into the channel and to help support the channel in one way, shape, or another. Guys, I really appreciate it. I hope you were able to successfully build your 270 DIY Monster Plenum mod. Hope this instructionable allowed you to install your DIY Monster Plenum mod. And please make sure to smash that like button for me. And let me know in the comments section below how easy was this for you to follow and to install. So once again, guys, thanks for watching. I'm Audi, and I'll see you later. Peace.